Record. I pressed it.
Already streaming. Click and go live. Yeah. All right. It's Monday, July 31st, 2023. I'm Rim.
I'm Scott.
And this is Geek Nights. Tonight we're here talking about when, how, why, and if to upgrade your tech. So, Emily is off in Michigan with family for about a week and a half, maybe 2 weeks, indeterminate length. As much as I wanted to go, I have too much actual work to do and not enough vacation days to just disappear for 2 more weeks, considering I've disappeared for several weeks along the way. And unlike certain individuals, I don't get every Monday off. But it's a damn shame. But the thing I did last night is there's a confluence of all these factors, and some of what I'm about to talk about briefly in our opening bit is not for the benefit of Scott. It's for the benefit of the listener who might not understand how different parks are in a place like New York City compared to pretty much any other place in America, but especially non-cities in America. So when I was a kid in Michigan, there was one really good thing about living in Michigan, and that was the fact that that time zone is the same time zone as New York City. And what does that mean? It stays light for almost an hour longer at night because you're on the other end of the same time zone. So when it's dark here, there is still sunlight where I grew up. So, I'm out.
It's always, if you're in a time zone, it's best to be on like the westish side of it no matter what. Right?
Absolutely. Because I remember as a kid, it doesn't get dark until like 9:45 at night in like the peak of summer. And that was just something that I really missed when I moved to New York.
Right. It's because we didn't do like gradual time, right? It's
for good reasons. Gradual time does not work, as America discovered.
Right. It would be logistically impossible to be.
We used to.
I'm on the east side of Queens, and you're on the west side. So actually, I'm a minute earlier than you. It's like technically you are.
That turns into I'm heading upstate to 125th Street.
Yeah, I'll be there. It's like, yeah, exactly. It's like, so because of that, it's like time zones have to have a width of about an hour of sunlight. And so you can get an extra hour of sunlight on the west side or an hour earlier sunlight on the east side.
So I was reminded of this because, Emily is off, had finished a day of travel, and I'm in the park because I'm out night biking, which is my real opening bit. I'm just biking around at night in New York because it's real fun to do that. And Emily calls me and we're chatting, and she reminds me that the sun is still visible where she is, and it is dark out where I am. And I'm like, fuck.
And it's the same time.
Exact same time.
Yep.
So, which reminded me of something else. When I was a kid, I was very angry about, like in middle school and high school, that all the parks in every suburb and subdivision and even Detroit that I ever lived in closed at night. Like, cops would check to see if kids were hanging out in the park, and they would fucking come after you if they saw you. Like, you could not openly hang out in a park at night.
Or at least they'd ask you to leave.
Yeah, so for a brief time, Sterling Heights had a curfew. They would write kids tickets and take them in the cruiser, and it was a whole thing. Statute of limitations ran out. I might have run from such police on numerous occasions because I figured a teenager on a bicycle, what are the odds the cop's going to shoot me or run me over as opposed to giving up? Now, in retrospect, not the best bet to take against American cops, but here I am. But I just remember being really mad about the fact that these are public spaces, but yet they are denied to people who are busy during the day or up at night. Like, imagine you're lonely or you can't sleep.
Central Park is closed at 1 a.m., I think,
Something like that. There are parks in New York that close at night.
Not supposed to go in there after a certain time, right?
But then there's parks like Queensbridge Park or Rainey Park, where there is a party going on there until 3 a.m. most weekend nights. Those parks are hopping.
Technically, Queensbridge Park closes, I guess, at 9, according to the park's website. But
according to the signs at the park, it doesn't seem to close because the lights are on all night in that park.
Yes, and it effectively doesn't close, even if there is some technical closing time.
Because regardless of the law and the procedures and the nonsense, the reality is you go to Queensbridge Park or Rainey Park late at night, especially on a Thursday, Friday, Saturday in the summer, and there are, if you're not from New York City, way more people hanging out in that park than you would ever expect.
There are
Like,
more people in the park than the population of some of the small towns. with
yeah,
those
right.
parks.
So in biking around last night, just in the evening on a New York summer night, I encountered several small scenes I want to briefly share, and then we can move on because it was just
Birthday party,
so
barbecue.
there was a
sporting
family
event.
having like a gigantic barbecue, but
Yep.
they had all paused because one of the kids had their cell phone held up and it was sending audio to a Bluetooth speaker, and this was all in Spanish, but it was obvious this was a prank call show, like a classic crank call show. And the entire family was like listening to this as an event while they're cooking. Like, it was great. You can hear the moment where the dial tone happens because the other guy hung up, and like it sounded like a comedy club, the amount of laughter coming out of this family. There were two baseball teams having a hella fucking party. I assume their
Sure it wasn't
championship.
softball?
It might have been softball. I didn't inspect too
I
closely.
know Queensbridge has a lot of softball going on.
I could definitely tell which team had won the game and which team had lost the game based on the way the two parties were evolving, which was really funny. A whole bunch of fireworks were going off from Roosevelt Island, like shit tons of fireworks. But then I hit in Rainy Park. I'm biking around up there, and I see a whole bunch of purple lights moving around like crazy as I'm coming up toward the park. And I'm like, what's going on over there? Some sort of like kid rave at night? It was, and this is normally, I might exaggerate. So older him might say, or exaggerating him might say, there were 30 bikes there. So I'm going to give the exact number. There were more than 10. As far as I could count, like directly, no exaggeration, white e-bikes with punk kids on them, doing tricks and hurting themselves, going crazy with these e-bikes on that big playground structure with the rock climbing thing on the left side of the park.
Oh, okay.
Like, it was a situation where on one hand, a parent should probably have shown up to stop this, but on the other hand, props to you kids. I doing the same fucking thing when I was your age, and they were having.
Is basically like a manufactured hill. It's
Yep.
on a real hill, but then there's like a manufactured hill on the real hill.
This would be dangerous on a
slide
BMX
is
bike.
built into the hill rather than a slide sort of freestanding.
This would be dangerous on a BMX bike, even for someone like me. This is beyond dangerous.
As a slide, though, it's a little safer than a regular slide because you can't like fall off the edge.
That is true.
Because it's just sort of built into a hill. So if you fall out of it, you're just sort of on the side of the hill.
Not like that slide at the park. I remember as a kid being like terrifyingly tall, and then as an adult visiting Michigan, I went to that park thinking there was no way that slide was as tall as I remember. And that slide was so fucking tall, I still cannot believe it's allowed to stand and kids are allowed to play on it.
Slide.
It wasn't the giant slide, which I have also ridden.
Giant slide.
It was not
the big slide, not the giant.
It was the big slide. The giant slide I have ridden, and
the ginormous slide. You go down it, your friend's neck breaks.
the kid you ain't even had's neck breaks.
Yeah.
One of your ancestors' necks break. So, yeah, anyway, that's a long way of saying, if you're ever in New York City and you're capable of it, I highly recommend just renting a city bike and just biking around on bike paths at night, especially in the summer. It is a fun, pretty safe, wild time, and you're not going to experience this in
It's just
most.
the same stuff you see during the day, only at night.
Yeah, but a little more shenanigans. Like, the kids on the e-bikes would not have been able to get away with that during the day.
Maybe.
They would have gotten away with it for like maybe an hour, but eventually a cop would have rolled up and gently scootled them.
Maybe.
So, you got any news? Because there's one big news that is like permeating every tech conversation if you're an internet person.
Yeah, that's the news we're going to talk about.
Yep.
We might have to do a whole show on
We're
it.
definitely going to have to do a whole show on it. This will not be
Try not to blow
comprehensive.
the whole load, right? But basically, Google, the Chrome people, they might add this feature. And the name that they have for the feature, what do they call it? Web integrity something something? The problem is web environment integrity is what Chrome is calling it, right? And what this is, it's a form of attestation. So to make a good, a classic analogy here, right? You go to the club and you want to get in the club, but there's a bouncer at the club and the bouncer doesn't know who the hell you are, right? And now, but if there's someone standing there, maybe the owner of the club, maybe an alcohol vendor or a famous person or the act that's performing at the club or someone the bouncer knows, they can attest for you and say, no, this guy's legit. Let him in, right? And if there's no one there to attest for you, the bouncer's like, who the hell are you? Ain't getting in. End of story, right? So the way this feature would work in Chrome is that you would visit a website. And the website would say, who is this person coming to visit my website? And they would, right? And now who is the trusted person, right? Because obviously not a human isn't doing this, right? So the website says, who can I trust to see if this person's legit? Well, fucking Google, right? So they go to Google and they're like, hey, Google, right? Is this web visitor with this browser, are they legit, right? Should I let them visit my website? And then Google will say, yes or no. And the way this is done is with some cryptographic biz. It's like, and Google contacts your computer and basically says, are they using Chrome? Is the Chrome a legit Chrome? Has it been modified and hacked? Is this a bot? Is this, right? And then the website would let you or not, would either send you HTML or if it doesn't like you, send you just an empty 401 response that's like unauthorized, get the hell out of here.
Now, before we even go any further, I think I should point out that this concept, while it may have broad use cases and there's value in certain specific kinds of things, it is pretty directly antithetical to what the World Wide Web was intended to be.
I mean, it's you have a web server, you send it bits, and then at its discretion, it sends you bits or it sends you different ones. It's their choice, right? It obviously in spirit, you're right, but technically it's like,
because on the other hand, it is not fundamentally necessarily different than a website that requires a subscription or a password or some sort of access token.
Right. So the good parts, this technology does have good parts, right? So Safari has already implemented this. They call it, what do they call it? Public something something.
I don't really.
They call it private access tokens, right? And if you look at the Apple documentation for the feature in Safari, the way it works is the way that they suggest developers use it is that you go to a website. The website goes to Apple and says, hey, is this Safari browser legit? And if Apple says, yes, that's a real Apple user with who's using real Safari, then that means not that website should just let you in, period, but that they could be like, oh, I know you're so legit because of this attestation. I'm not going to show you any CAPTCHAs, right? Yep. And that's what Apple suggests. They're like, hey, reduce CAPTCHAs for our users. If you're going to CAPTCHA someone, right, instead of doing that, do this first. And if you don't like, and if that gives you a bad result, then show a CAPTCHA, right? And though theoretically, if people implement the feature, users would get less CAPTCHAs, which is good for usability for people who can't even solve a CAPTCHA, people with disabilities. It's, makes the internet just better overall, right? It's like, that's a very good thing. If Apple vouching for you means CAPTCHAs are gone, or Google vouching for you means CAPTCHAs are gone. There are other legitimate uses as well, but obviously the illegitimate use would be, I have come to this website and Google says, this person is using Chrome, but they got ad block, so don't let them visit your website because you won't make any money, right? It's like, and then they block you because you have ad block. Now, that's sort of, it's sort of like this slippery slope doomsday scenario, right? And it's like, on the one hand, it's like, yeah, that's way bad, right? But is anyone actually going to implement it that way, right? Is the slope going to slip to the bottom?
And that's a really important question because historically these things have not gone down that road because nerds just won't use services that go down those roads.
It's like, sure, Google might put this feature in their browser, right? And so might everyone, all the major browser vendors might all implement this, right? But will all major websites, important websites actually go through with, implementing the harshest, situation of block anyone who is using any modified browser of any kind?
I do think there's one class of website that likely will, but I think that class of website is the kind of website that today aggressively attempts to block people who are using ad blockers already.
Yeah, and it's like if you're blocked from going to those websites, I don't see much loss there.
No. Right? Why go to the enshittified website that's telling you it's
Yeah.
enshittified.
Exactly. Now, a big major website, right? Like maybe like a big major news website, if they start blocking all the people who have ad blocks, it's like they're already not blocking people who are bypassing their paywalls with special tools.
Yep.
Right. It's like, but even if they did, I don't think they will, because number one, there's going to be a lot of false positives. Anyone using any older technology, any weird, is suddenly not going to be able to go to like New York Times, CNN, MSN. It's like, their numbers that they see in their metrics of like how many people visit their websites would drop precipitously.
Yep.
Because right now they're benefiting, right? Marketing people love fake numbers, right? That are falsely inflated, right?
I mean, I could legitimately give a extremely wide range of the number of listeners to Geek Nights based on all perfectly plausible mathematical models.
Yeah, think about other, it's like they love to tell people a huge number, like this, how many people visited our website this month. That's why you should buy ads. You'll get so many eyeballs. If they actually had to give a real number because they actually blocked all the bots and all the other right? If they had to give an honest number, it's like they might like to know that number, right? They might implement the technology just to count, to see the truth. How many actual humans with unmodified browsers are uniquely visiting us, on a whatever time period basis. But to actually block everyone else, that means they would have to go tell advertisers, yeah, only like 1 million people actually, only like 1 million. And they'd be like, that's way smaller than the number you've been telling us for years.
Yep.
Right? Why would we buy ads from you to only get that many eyeballs if that's the true number, right? They don't want the true number to be there, right? So I don't know if anyone will actually do that.
Yeah, because that's an arms race. Once that true number is revealed, then that is probably equally harmful to the advertising ecosystem as ad blocks are.
Yeah. There's also the situation of like, you could use this technology in reverse. You could block anyone who doesn't have ad block. You could be like, oh, you've got an unmodified Chrome. Guess what? You can't visit my website. You better have some kind of modification so I know you're a nerd. Nerds only. Right?
That's why I was saying I'd love to be able to go down the opposite route directly, like all the people who blocked every check mark on Twitter back when Twitter was still usable slightly. Block anyone who doesn't have ad block from your website.
Yeah, there could be other security things going on too, right? Like a bank website. Now, the banks haven't even implemented 2FA properly. So
yeah.
Are they really going to implement this, right? But even if they did implement it, it's like, are they really going to block all their customers and deal with the customer support problems that they're going to have as a result? It's I don't think they're actually going to do that.
No.
Right? And even if they went that far, there's a good way they could do it. They could say, look, your browser's out of date. We're only allowing people with up-to-date browsers to visit the bank website. And just if you're not up to date, they'll give you a message, update your shit. And you know what? That could be positive, actually.
Yep.
Right? They could give you the message to update your shit and still let you in, too, at your own risk.
My fear is what the direction... This is almost a sideshow, I worry, because the direction every company, I think, is actually going to go is trying to not have websites and force everyone into apps. Like, that's been the dream of capitalism forever.
Right, but it's like, if it's app only, it's like, all right, yeah.
I mean, I generally avoid app-only things because, reasons. Mostly ethical and futurist reasons.
If there's a thing that is app-only, I will avoid that thing generally. Like, there's a lot of, we've seen a lot of social networks crop up that are like app-only.
But like my bank,
websites.
Why would I ever use the bank's? The bank's app sucks.
Like I can use the website or the app, and it's like I use both depending on when I'm doing.
But they're different use cases. I use the app for like very specific things when I have my phone. But if I'm doing like banking, like anything complex at all, of course I have a website open because I'm probably moving money around between a bunch of accounts or doing something complex.
Yeah, I mean, it'll take a long. The web would have to like really collapse for big companies to actually turn that shit out. I think that what's in my estimation, what's actually going to happen if this goes through and actually becomes a thing, is the websites that will block you are websites you didn't want to go to anyway, and you'll be happy that they block you.
You know who I'm gonna make a bet. Ticketmaster is gonna implement it.
Maybe. But the other places, right, there will be workarounds, right? You'll be able to set up like you'll either just have like a Chrome on the side that's unmodified that you can use in those special cases, right? And then you'll have your other browser used for everything else.
Real browser that just takes the HTML.
Proxy. Yeah, you'll have some sort of proxy browser, right? Or it's like, and I don't think this Pi-hole kind of ad blocking will be stopped by this, right? It's like you verified that my iPhone has been unmodified and has the legit Safari on it, right? And I haven't, modified it in any way. I'm attested by Apple. Show me the website. And then they send me the HTML, and then all the DNS requests to all the advertisement sites are returned up with no result because I have a pie hole in my house, right? It's like, that's not going to stop that. So, there's plenty of workarounds for this. It's not like the end of the world, but people are acting like it's the end of the world because they're looking at the, I'm not saying like it's good. Like I think I would be happier if they just.
I think part of what's happening is that the kinds of people who even know like the FSF exists and like know are capable of understanding the possible dangers of things like this are the kinds of people who have had to raise alarm bells for lots of dangerous tech for so long that, kind of like with climate change, unless you describe an apocalyptic scenario, nobody gives a shit.
Right. So it would be much better if the people, crying that the sky is falling, were on their side, right?
Yep.
Even though there are some positive uses, like I said, getting rid of CAPTCHAs that I would enjoy and would be good overall. But the apocalyptic scenarios that they're describing, I don't think are unlikely. I think it will be a slope, but the reality is that if it goes through, we will not go to the bottom of the slope. We will go somewhere down the slope, but not to the bottom. And it'll be sort of some good things will happen and some meh things will happen. And,
Yep. One thing I did see, not that I am advocating the Brave browser, because I do not personally trust any niche browsers.
Trust that shit. Yeah.
But they did announce they will never support web environment integrity APIs.
Right. It's really not going to be decided by the browsers. It's going to be decided by the websites. The web, each and every different website can choose for itself. Are you going to allow people to visit? Or are you going to keep things the way they are? Are you going to check attestation, are you going to, like a bouncer could just look at you and let you in, right? Are you going to tell your bouncer to check everyone to see if they're legit, right? And maybe let them in right? It's like, it's up to you. And so it's like what the majority of websites do and if and how they implement this, that will determine what's going on, right? But if the major browsers, right, Safari's already has it, but if Google doesn't do it, if they win their battle and Google doesn't implement it in Chrome, that takes the decision out of the website's hands because now they can't do it. They'd be, right, blocking every Chrome browser in the universe. Right?
Yep.
So,
which possibly short term is a better option just to avoid even having to address the slope.
Does add the feature and deploys it in a stable release to every Chrome browser out there, then it will be in the hands of the websites individually and also collectively.
I would bet money fucking Ticketmaster implements it as fast as possible if we get to that point.
Maybe that's the kind of website that might want to attest visitor,
Yep. Some of the anyway. So not to blow our load, but we'll probably talk about this as a whole show at some point because there's a lot of details to unpack.
I think rather than do it right away, let's wait until we see how it pans out.
Oh, absolutely. This is not next Monday.
Next time there's a big shift in the news, right, of like a decision point that actually happened, like it's deployed in Chrome everywhere, then we can do a whole episode on it.
Yep, that's a good line. So in some other news, I think we both talked about how this would be the absolutely best idea for any news organization to do as Twitter has, the app formerly known as Twitter, has collapsed into ruin. And the BBC did it like earlier today, less than 12 hours ago. The BBC just went live with social.bbc, which is the BBC's own single official Mastodon instance, and the only accounts on it are official BBC content.
What if a BBC person who is on there loses their job? Are they just managing it the same way you manage like email accounts at the BBC?
I think they're managing it just like that. Right now, it looks like it is only official accounts. They've started just with studios and brands.
So they don't have an individual account for each reporter and journalist.
Now, if they do down the road, I am confident they'll do it the way a lot of organizations do. Like I work at a big organization. If you have a public account to use for social media, that account is owned by the company, not by you, because you're
obviously
creating content.
I think there could be an interesting tech setup though, where like you have like you're a journalist at the BBC, you have an account on this instance.
Yep.
You start, I guess, tweet messaging, right? You start posting messages.
I refuse to say toot.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna say tweet.
Posting messages from the field, right? And then rather than them going public immediately, there's some editor whose only job is to like look at a feed of all the journalists sending all the messages and to like click like yes, no, yes, no, right? Like fact checking and spell checking and, you know, like all the messages getting checked at some central place by like, it would only take a handful of people. How many messages are there really going to be, right?
Yep. So the other cool thing about this, they're very open about how this is an experiment, and the research and development team is running it publicly to try this out. And I
think the problem, what I worry, I think they're going to do a great job. I think the problem is they might not get enough traffic right now. It's like it's one of those things where like they dip the toe in the water and they're like, oh, too cold, never mind, right? It's like no, it doesn't work. You have to go all the way in the water and stay in there and acclimate.
Kind of like all the
you can decide
the news orgs like the BBC that in the early days of Twitter doubled down on Twitter back when nobody used Twitter.
Yep. It's like you have to make a real effort, stick with it for a long time, you know, and then once, you know, other people follow, and then that's what will make it. You have to make it work. You can't just see if it works like it's someone else doing the making it work part. It's like, no, you're part of the making it work by going all in, and that's the only way it can happen. So
now the cool part would be
their numbers are going to be low for a long time.
Yeah.
Right?
But the next step would be, one, if these other apps and Meta start implementing activity feed, then that's going to start driving this ecosystem. And two, if
activity pub
that provides a feed of activity.
Yes.
But two, if another, like the first follower, the next news org makes theirs, and they cross-federate and they start retweeting each other, or like having the journalism conversations between each other that used to happen on Twitter. Because the beauty of that, if the BBC and unnamed news organization too do it that way, their reporters can verify stories and discuss with each other publicly the same way they used to do on Twitter. But Joey Jojo crypto fascist can't butt in and won't show up on either of their feeds if he's coming from his bullshit Nazi Mastodon server.
Yep.
They can implement Mastodon however they want. So I've been whispering in the ear of a few friends I have who are pretty senior at several news orgs, not BBC, but other ones. I have already emailed them being like, look, the BBC did what I suggested. You should seriously try this out. So let's see.
Yeah, I want to see some, you know, Associated Press, some Reuters.
Yep.
You know, and some, you know, even fucking News Corp, right? It's like, you know.
Yep.
I could block your server, but it's like you can make one, right?
Yep.
At least.
I want you to make one for me to block.
That's right. It would, you know.
That's a healthy internet.
That's right. We're not.
So one last news. I'm not going to dwell on it because we've gone on a little long, but it's a big deal. The first new nuclear reactor in the U.S. that was built from scratch in several decades has entered commercial operation. It is live. It is generating 25% of the total power output of Georgia Power, the largest power company in like the Atlanta area.
Fucking go.
This is huge news. This is, as best I can tell, I didn't read all the details of the reactor, but it is a Generation 3 reactor, a light water reactor, which is, so basically all the reactors.
It is a good kind.
Yes. Basically, Generation 1 is like a pile. Like that's just, dude, that is no honorable or esteemed deeds are commemorated at a Gen 1 reactor. Gen 2 is what almost every nuclear power plant on Earth is, except in like France. And they're the ugly bad ones like Indian Point. Generation 3 are the same basic technology as Gen 2, but built with modern ideas and modern designs. And they are ludicrously safe. Now, you're going to see some stories complaining about how this project was like $17 billion over budget and took a lot longer than they expected. Yeah, I'd say that doesn't only sound cheap, it is cheap, because the biggest mistake anyone advocating for realistic policies around energy or the environment in America has, or even Europe has ever done, is talking about the dollars something cost. Because it's not, we could spend those dollars somewhere else to do something different. It's more, what are the externalities of this power versus other kinds of power? The dollars are just a fiction of how you expend capital to make it happen. So
if you don't do it, you're gonna generate that power, the people of Georgia, either what will be the damage of not generating the power of the people of Georgia not having enough power, right? How much damage will that be that you just averted?
how many more coal and oil power plants would have to spin up to cover this load?
If you use some other kind of power, right, to generate those megawatts, and you keep the people of Georgia powered, how much damage will be caused by that other kind of power you chose? Now, maybe you chose wind or something that's not coal, right?
Yeah.
But it's like, how much? Then it's a question of, okay, you've got more options that all don't really cause significant damage, at least, right? Like coal does. Which one gets you the most power per dollar?
Yep.
Right? And having 25% of an entire state's power with one facility sounds like efficient design to me.
Yep. And long run, those dollars.
How many wind? It's not that I don't like wind, right? China just made like the wind's biggest world, right? It's the biggest wind.
I mean, with New York, unless something blocks it, we're gonna get that ridiculous array feeding through Ravenswood.
We'll see. But not that I'm against wind, but like, how many turbines would and how much would they cost?
Yep.
Or,
well, also, there's more to the point. We need.
How much would they cost?
Humans need a variety, like a heterogeneous environment of how we generate power so we can innovate in all these different areas simultaneously, and so they can complement each other because they're all good at different kinds of power. And if you're a nerd and you want to learn about how much more complicated this than you could imagine, look up reactive power versus non-reactive power and why it's so hard to generate the amount and kind of electricity we need to power society. No one type of power generation technology will solve our problems for the foreseeable future of the Earth. All right, put a little marker. So, things of the day. An old standby in Geek Nights I liked to find. We're really into anime music videos. I'm still into anime music videos, like AMVs and like that sort of stuff. I enjoy them. I even made one. But I used to try to find whenever a different fandom has a similar culture. Like I found all those Horatio Hornblower fan videos. There were a lot of them. This one's pretty good. I just bumped into this. It is a music video just made by a fan to the movie Metropolis and the song Feed the Machine.
Metropolis?
The original Metropolis. Yeah, Fritz Lang Metropolis.
Okay.
Yeah, not if this was just an AMV to anime who was all involved. I forget who directed that.
Was that a Rentaro one, I think?
Was it? Anyway, I'll look it up. We reviewed it, God, how long ago? I saw that thing.
It was a Rentaro joint, yes.
But this is a music video by a fan to Fritz Lang's Metropolis. And you know what? It's real good because that movie, pretty prescient to everything that's happening in society right now. If you've never actually watched Metropolis, you should see it at least once. If you don't get the metaphor of what's going on in this music video, capitalism's just going to eat you, buddy. So what do you got?
Well, so in July 20th, I think, 1973, Bruce Lee, you know who Bruce Lee is, right? That was when he died. It was 50 years ago, right? I wasn't even alive then. And at the time that Bruce Lee died, he was 32. And a basketball player, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, was 25, right? And I don't know how many people know this, that Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and Bruce Lee, they were buddies, right?
I learned this 1 second ago.
Right. It is a famous scene in Game of Death where they fight each other, right? But Kareem was training with Bruce Lee at the time because, right, he was like, hey, Bruce Lee was getting famous. Kareem saw him and was like, hey, look at how that guy's moving his body. I'm a professional athlete. That is relevant to what I do, right? That can help me. If I go and learn from that guy, that will help my basketball. And well, he was excellent at basketball, so maybe he wasn't entirely wrong about that. But anyway, so here's on the anniversary of the death of Bruce Lee, right? Kareem uploaded to his blog/newsletter, right? Basically a thing that he had written about Bruce Lee, right? There was a chapter in Kareem's autobiography about Bruce Lee. So he took the chapter from his own autobiography and put it on his newsletter, right? And so here you can read that chapter without having to buy his whole book. It's not very long post, but the best part was a quote of Bruce Lee that I had not heard before, right? where Bruce Lee said, what's the actual quote? I fear not the man who has practiced 10,000 kicks once, but I fear the man who has practiced one kick 10,000 times. So I think that was the big takeaway for me, is like, figure out that one kick you want to become perfect at and just kick 10,000 times, right? And then it's like, sure, you know what kick I'm going to do, but how you going to stop it? It's such a good kick. I practiced it 10,000 times. It's going to hit you in the face every time. You can't.
What, you gonna jump over my Hadouken?
It's a metaphor and not actual kicking, but it could be actual kicking. Maybe you're maybe that's what you're doing. But
hey, being real good at kicking is a reasonably valuable thing to know.
I'm just saying, it's like I've practiced computer 10,000 times, right? I practiced winning a board game 10,000 times.
In the meta moment, the Geek Nights Book Club book. This is how you lose the Time War. We didn't do the show on Thursday last week, even though we both read the book, because I had a conflict to do that came up last minute for reasons. But we will do this show on the next Thursday episode, or if we don't have a Wednesday show, partly because we can't cover any SAG-AFTRA strike struck works, maybe we'll just...
How many struck works are we even seeing?
I mean, I am.
Anything we talk about is not going to be... I'm not...
I mean, Nimona, top-tier animated movie on Netflix. That's a struck work, technically.
I don't even have Netflix right now.
Yeah? I mean, you're not watching stuff, but I am.
No.
You ain't watching anything. So
I
might...
don't watch television. Okay.
We might just do the Thursday show this week so we can get this book club out of the way and I can announce the next 2 book choices.
Yep.
If you haven't read this book yet, it is a short read, like a few hours tops. It reads quick. There's stuff going on. I got some stuff to say.
Let's go back to some more substantial books for the, because we had a few short ones. We had Binti and we had this one, right? I guess,
but let's keep it to like 0.6 Genjis or lower.
Versus is a fine length. I can read that. I can check it out of the library and read it before I have to.
No Genjis. So
extending it.
I was learning a lot of detail about the Crimean War lately, which led me to have a strange feeling to read a book I have never actually read, and I'm not going to pick it as the book club yet, but I kind of want to at some point. But I'm not going to put War and Peace on the list this time.
No, at least War and Peace is fiction.
Yeah, and I do want to read it.
I tried to read Crime and Punishment one time.
Crime and Punishment, that's a short read. I read that in like a week. I've read it twice.
I didn't stop reading because of the length.
Nah, Crime and Punishment is actually one of my favorite novels.
Okay.
There's a lot going on. Good old Raskolnikov being a dipshit and then learning his lesson. He committed a crime and then he accepted his punishment.
Dun, dun.
Spoilers.
It was in the spoilers in the title.
All right. So we have done a show a while ago on like upgrading computers and workstations specifically, but that was a very narrow show. But there's a lot of other
shows on like updating your software, and this is but upgrading and stuff is a topic we have covered in like uses and other times, but we haven't done a show on it, and we need show ideas, so let's go.
Yeah, but also I think there's a good topic here because there is, I would argue, a very distinct difference between replacing something, possibly because it has failed in some way,
or
versus
broke it on purpose,
or upgrading something when you already have a thing that solves that kind of problem to have a better thing that solves that problem.
Yeah, just today in the GeekNights Discord server that you can join, right? We were discussing mechanical keyboards because 8-Bit Do came out with those new Nintendo Famicom style keyboards.
Yeah,
right?
I almost made one of those my thing of the day because they look real stylish.
They look real stylish, but they look real impractical, especially the mouse, which we were commenting on.
Yeah.
But I think they could be useful for some cool installation or special projects. But regardless, it's like I talked about, hey, look, I have a mechanical keyboard. It has Cherry MX Brown switches. It has a USB cable, right? It works. It has backlights. I replaced the keycaps to much better keycaps. But it's like, well, now it's like I see and I covet, actually, not going to lie, all these fancy mechanical keyboards that I keep seeing popping up in my feeds all the time. I'm like, ooh, that's cool.
Yep.
Ooh,
Rule number one,
right?
Do not upgrade because you are covetous. That is almost always a bad idea.
And then I look down at my keyboard and I'm like, all right, in what way is that keyboard that I'm coveting really better than this one? It's a different style maybe, right? but I guess it's newer. Some of them are wireless. That's a slight improvement, but not much for a keyboard that never leaves the desk. It might actually be a negative in some cases, right? It's like there's nothing about them that is actually going to like improve my day-to-day keyboarding, and this one works just fine. It works terrific, in fact.
Now it's possible,
and it's like, and those ones that I covet, they ain't cheap. They're expensive. So
now aesthetics could in some situations be a reason to upgrade. For example, let's say
I had so much money that it didn't matter. That sure.
Yeah,
Okay,
but even then, having so much money that it doesn't matter, that edges into the externalities of being wasteful by upgrading things too often, which is something you should consider as a person.
Yeah,
but two,
maybe.
let's say you live streamed a lot more often with multiple camera angles and your keyboard was highly visible in those, then upgrading for aesthetic reasons might actually make a lot of sense.
Maybe.
But for your use case, does not make a lot of sense.
Nope.
And meanwhile, that keyboard looks great, but I bought a $180 DOS keyboard a long time ago, and guess what? It is in perfect condition.
Exactly. Right. So I guess that's the first case. When, we're not talking about broken things, right?
Yep.
So when you should upgrade, it has to actually be an improvement. You should be able to point and explain, this will improve my life, in a certain way. And if you can't, name that way, then you're just throwing money away.
I'm going to throw out a doctrinaire product management term, the idea of a market problem, which, abstractly just means, is there a problem that someone out there has where they would be willing to spend some amount of money, ostensibly on you, to solve or mitigate that problem in some way? And that is a good way to frame any time you are purchasing anything in your life that isn't inconsequential or like food. Though even then, food, arguably, my problem is I am hungry. But
Yes.
Do you need a keyboard? Like, what are you going to use a keyboard for? If you need a keyboard, buy a keyboard. And then you have to evaluate what keyboard best solves your particular problem. Because unlike product management, you're not trying to find the best keyboard for the abstract person out there. You're trying to find the best keyboard for you in your exact specific situation. Money's a factor. Aesthetics are a factor. Quality, workflow, what you do with your life, they're all factors there.
Yep. Now, I think a good category to look at, right, is cameras, because in the camera world, they have this thing called gear acquisition syndrome that they call it GAS. That's like the term they use, right? Because photographers love to buy new cameras and keep upgrading, right? And since even in film cameras, like camera companies are coming, you think, look at computers, how much are they coming out with, right? It's like there are new cameras all the damn time, right? It's like they just keep updating those things constantly. So, and you can switch brands to upgrade. Photographers love to sell all their shit in a huge pile and get a pile of money and then buy all new shit from a different
You know who else
company.
does this?
Like,
audio engineers, podcasters, and DJs. If you need any of this kind of technology, just go on eBay and you'll find like pristine equipment for nothing.
So I was watching some camera YouTube videos, right, where they were interviewing people who are like, photographers, right, for reals. Like these are people who spent all day photographying, right? It's like their number one hobby, right? They do it more than I bike. That's how much they do it. And there were two different people who had seemingly the exact opposite opinions, and they were both very, very convincing, right? One photographer, when discussing gear acquisition syndrome, said, "Are you better than your camera?" Right? It's like, sure, there is a better camera than your camera available, because it literally, your camera is already old and this other camera is new.
I heard that exact same phrase in the context of, are you better than your golf clubs?
Right, exactly. It's like, if your skills aren't so great that the limiting factor is the equipment, like you're taking the best photo you can take with that camera, and if you had a newer camera, you could take a better photo. That means you're better than the camera, and therefore you should go get a new one because you'll take a better photo. But it's like, if you could improve yourself, your own photography skills, your own eye, and take a better photo than the photos you've already taken with the camera you still have, why are you spending money to upgrade the equipment? That's not going to get you. You're not going to take a better photo with that one because your skill is still the limiting factor, right?
There may be other factors
so that's very
there,
convincing, right? Now, another person had a different opinion, right? Which is also very convincing. And their opinion was this: there's the scene in Indiana Jones where the guy has the sword and
Yeah.
Indiana just shoots him, right? And it's like, if you're going into a fight and you show up with a sword and the other person has a gun, it's like, it makes no sense, right?
Yep.
It's like, you should if you're going in to do a thing, you should bring the strongest, most powerful thing available, right? And so,
Okay, case in point, I got my really nice pancake lens. Like, I love that lens, but it's not a zoom lens, just a pancake lens. Like, I gotta, what's the term? Zoom with your feet?
Yeah.
So I can take real good pictures with this thing, but you know what? If I spend a lot of money, I could have a really good zoom lens that would be just as good as that lens for most use cases, and it would save me a lot of hassle, and I could take the equivalent photos with way less physical effort and mental effort.
Yeah. Well, so the thing there is, I think that argument is true, but only in that person's context was like actually trying to be a photographer, like a published professional.
Yep, which I think you hit on the both perspectives are equally compelling. This is an ambivalent situation. It really depends on your situation.
Right. If you're going to sell photos, to try to get them in a magazine, to try to print a book and sell copies, to put photos in a gallery and sell them, right? And it's like, if someone else is taking photos with like the latest, greatest camera, right? They're ultra high resolution and their autofocus is better. And you've got one that's, 5 years old, 3 years old, right? Let's say you got two sports photographers next to each other at the Olympics. Someone's got a brand new one. Someone's got the 2-year-old one. It's like, they're going to get the shot. They got more frames per second. They got better autofocus. They got better megapixels, right? They got more likely to get the shot, and and their shot's going to look better in the high res, and it's going to get into the newspapers, and they're going to buy from that photographer and not from you, right? So in that sort of situation, it's like, you got to get better. Upgrade, get better stuff, right? It's actually,
I think there's another argument for that side in some cases, and that is when the technology you have is old enough to where the workflows around it are materially obsolete, and thus learning to use that technology better, which for photography is not as much of a thing, but it could be in, like, especially certain kinds of film photography. But in a lot of other areas, like learning how to use a camcorder from the 90s is not going to teach you anything useful.
No.
You will learn nothing.
And for retro, you can do it for fun. You can do it you might actually want to, have a project where like that's part of the, it's supposed to look like that, right?
But like learning the pipeline to record a 2-person podcast like GeekNights on a purely analog setup, that is a nearly worthless skill that is not marketable and will not likely be useful to you at any point in your life compared to the sheer ease of a modern pure digital workflow. But look back at GeekNights as an example. When we first started GeekNights, the Logitech stick microphone was not the limiting factor on GeekNights. Us being good at talking continuously for an audience.
Were we better than that microphone?
No, for at least a while, we were not better than that microphone. But as soon as we got better than that microphone, we rapidly had to evolve our technology. But we had a sort of a separate problem that I didn't want to get into. Even if, like, we would have gotten the correct tool for the job, but back then, we did not have enough money to afford the best tool for the job. So we instead had to make do with the best tool we could afford. Remember those Radio Shack mics? We recorded GeekNights for a while on those things. And they sucked, and they were a problem, but that was the best we could do. We still had to upgrade, but we upgraded not to the top of the line, but to like this middle of the road milestone along the way. And that is often a good option if you're not a professional or don't have unlimited money. Of course, you also got to avoid the sword problem of if you have unlimited money, don't buy the $5,000 microphone. There is no possible use on earth for that. And if you can think of a use, you're either a professional in a industry other than radio and podcasting, or you're lying and you're a golden ear audiophile type.
Yeah, I mean, there are things you can upgrade to, right? If you look at any product category where it's like, yes, there is something better, but it's very expensive. And then it's like, there's actually something that's even more expensive that's not actually better. It's just there to take money from people, right?
Yep.
It's like, if you go to the store with the fancy jewelry and look at the watches, and like, for some reason you want a mechanical jewelry watch that costs a shit ton of money, right? It's like, they have them, there's Rolexes that cost, tens, maybe even hundreds of thousands of dollars, maybe even millions, who knows, right? But it's like there are also like, other luxury watch brands, right, that are out there that aren't Rolex, or maybe they're cheaper Rolexes. It's like, and it's like, are they going to be really worse, right? Probably not, right?
Yep.
It's like,
and that's where you can't upgrade too high on the cost path, regardless of how much money you have, until you have enough understanding of the thing you're buying to understand where is the point beyond which it's diminishing returns and stealing money from foolish rich people.
Right. Exactly. Like if I won the lottery, right, and I, which is like, I'm basically, my bicycle, I have no reason to upgrade it whatsoever, right?
Yeah.
But like, I have nothing to change on it, like no complaints whatsoever, except that the chain just broke, right? But besides that, right? It's like, but if I were to go and like I got a huge pile of money, and it's like, why not buy a new bike, right? It's like they sell $20,000 bikes, $30,000 bikes.
I've ridden a 20-ish, actually an $18,000 bike once, and was it $10,000 better than the $8,000 mountain bike I rode? No. But was it better? Yeah. But I'm not a professional mountain biker running races for money.
Right. So look here, Trek Domain, right? I guess sort by price, high to low, right? So they have the Trek Domain SLR9 AXS Gen 4 is $13,000, right? It's like, even if I won the lottery, I probably would not choose that one, right? I might choose, something like, I don't know, the Domain SL7 Gen 4 for $6,800, right? It's like, that's much more reasonable. And am I better than that bike, right? It's like, I'm not, I just choose the bike that I'm the cheapest bike that I am not better than, right? Is where I would go. Even if money was no object, right? They're just handing out free bikes. Pick any model you want. I still wouldn't pick the $13,000 one.
Yep.
Right.
Now, some cases you do get the absolute best thing, and
that's usually in product categories where no one's trying to milk the high end with nonsense.
So, for example, I had water filters. We hike and camp a lot, me and Emily, and one. Don't fuck around with drinking water you found outside. That's just a general rule of life.
Yes.
So,
I guess if it's like a natural fucking spring, or like you took some glacier and you melted it, or something like that.
I mean, natural springs, you still got to test, like you did. But anyway,
obviously, but
So, there are perfectly effective ways to filter water that are pretty cheap, but they either make the water taste like ass. Like they taste like bleach, you're just drinking bleach, or they're not 99.9999% effective. They're only like 99% effective. So, of course, I bought the $300 like military grade for real filter because I'm not going to fuck around with my own personal safety, especially drinking water within 100 miles of New York City out in the woods. But I did upgrade from the Life Straw because while the Life Straw is also super effective, you cannot get enough water through that quickly if you are thirsty, let alone if you're going to cook with water. Like I need to be able to pump like a couple gallons of clean water quickly to then go cook with out in the woods. So let's see. I guess we could talk about a few examples. Like right now, TVs are actually a really good topic. I have a TV that I should replace. One, because it's dying. But it's been dying for a couple of years now, but it's hit the point where the brightness is at max, and it's slowly dimming beyond the point where I can
probably repair it and replace just the backlights, and you'll be all good.
Yeah, but it's also...
The problem is that TVs are so cheap now, especially if you weren't getting an OLED. Like if you went for like, like one of those like Hisense and like or like one of those QLEDs and like not the highest end model. If you went for like the second best model, it's like we're talking hundreds of dollars, right?
Yep.
To get a new TV that would be way better, at least visually, than your TV when it was new.
Yep.
Right.
So
it's like,
and I guess
how much is it going to cost to repair the backlights? Maybe also hundreds. So why would you do that?
Exactly. But I'd been wanting to upgrade my TV to a 4K TV because while there aren't a lot of streaming things to use
how much 4K content is available?
Games in the living room, HTPC, stuff like that.
Maybe.
I have use cases, but the reason I have not upgraded is that I have until very recently, now that the TV's toward its death, I had a perfectly good TV that covered 90% of everything I cared about. That slight bump in quality was not worth the extra cost when it still worked, and it was not worth the externality of I'm replacing something that theoretically I could keep using, bad for the environment. But also, by waiting a couple more years instead of upgrading when I originally wanted to, 2 more generations of OLED TVs have come out. I can get a TV that is way better than the one I could have gotten a few years ago.
And did you suffer really for those 2 years? Were you like,
No, the only time I suffered,
what was the opportunity cost of the past 2 years of the shitty TV?
Yeah, so you know what the opportunity cost was? A couple of shows we watched were too dark, but wasn't that big a deal. And playing Disco Elysium together on the couch, not ideal because of the 1080p text instead of 4K text.
But you didn't die, you lived.
Yeah, it degraded the experience, but to a degree that was not material.
Yeah. I mean, if you need more brightness, right, the OLED TVs, right, which obviously special.
Oh, no, I only need more brightness compared to this TV is like dimming rapidly.
Right, yeah. I mean, especially since, you have that new building that went up blocking all the sunlight. You're probably, the OLED is the good choice, right? You usually need the LCD these days if you want to A, save money, or B, you want to like overpower some other lights because you're watching in a bright environment.
Yep. No, OLED is the use case.
It's now very dark, so.
But to talk about a very similar situation, remember we were in RIT and one day my computer stopped working, and that was, being a nerd at RIT, that is the second worst possible thing that could happen to you. The worst being like getting cancer or something. Like my computer breaking was existential. It was the capacitor problem. I had
that one. Yeah.
Yep. So I had a motherboard, and it had an AMD K7 800 in it. So when it died, my options were replace it or use this as an opportunity to upgrade. And that was actually a difficult decision because on one hand, I could buy a new motherboard, put the same CPU I had into that motherboard, and probably keep going because it was very unlikely that CPU was damaged. Only the motherboard was damaged. However, the industry had just shifted again from CPUs in sockets, which in retrospect didn't last that long, to slots again. And when the slots happened, that was clearly going to be the future of CPUs basically forever after that point. So if I got a slot instead of a socket, I would have to also upgrade the CPU, but I could get a gigahertz CPU, which going from 800 megahertz to a gigahertz in the year 2002.
That's a huge improvement.
Yeah, that is a significant material improvement. And that was an era where you could upgrade CPUs 1 to 1.5 times before the socket changed and the motherboards were incompatible. That is not the case now.
Changes like, a lot.
Yeah. So like nowadays, I would pretty much say if your motherboard dies, replace that and the CPU. If the CPU dies, replace the motherboard, like replace the whole fucking thing, just build a new computer, use your existing non-core components.
Save your hard drives. That's about it.
But in the year 2002, it was materially better to use the opportunity to upgrade. The incremental cost difference actually gave me a computer that lasted a lot longer. It saved me money in the long run and gave me a better experience. I did have to convince my dad to give me a few $100 because I couldn't afford it, but it all worked out.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing is when the upgrade, right, is not replacing an entire object, right, but is replacing a part of a whole, right? It's like, and if it can extend the lifespan or the useful lifespan of the larger, more expensive object, you might actually be saving money by upgrading.
Yep.
Right? Even if it's something extreme, like a new engine in the car, there are times when, as expensive as that is, where that could be better than new car, right?
Yep.
Maybe you found the engine in like at the junkyard from a similar car that got hit, and then you were able, a guy who swapped it in, right? It's like, and they crashed their brand new car, so the engine was hardly used. It's like there are situations you can get away with in life if you're resourceful.
But meanwhile, when the CD player in the radio of my 1998 Pontiac Sunfire that barely ran broke, even replacing it was not worth it. So I just wired up my iPod mini or micro whatever the small iPod was, into the car with a bootleg adapter and made it work and just made do. I didn't upgrade or replace, because if I had bought a nice radio or a CD switcher or something to put in that car, that thing probably would have been worth more than the whole car.
Probably, yeah.
You remember that car toward the end of its life. It was decrepit is the word. So yeah,
I do see a lot of people out there, right? It's common in all fields of nerdery and geekery who have the gear acquisition syndrome or the upgrade fever, right? It's like new NVIDIA card, they just keep upgrading it all the time, right?
Yep.
It's like, new cameras, they get the new ones all the time. TVs, new TV every year, right?
Yep. But
It's
look,
like,
I'm a computer professional for whom video gaming is a primary hobby who does VR. And you know what? I still have a 1080 in my computer. And that is in there on purpose. So think about that if you're about to buy a 4080.
Right. It's like, is it, if you went into someone's house who just upgraded like their 2080 or their 3080 to a 4080, and you switched it back to the 3080, right? And if they never looked at any benchmarks, or they never looked at any,
would they even know?
If they never looked at their frame rate or anything, would they know? They wouldn't know, right? There's no way they would know, right? It's still running, a 3080 still runs every game at max settings, full frames, and so does a 4080, right? And like, unless they do something like try to render some ridiculous video or mine bitcoins or something stupid like that, right? It's like, they will not know, right?
But meanwhile, remember... But when I upgraded to 4K monitors a while before you did. And you came over one day back when we were playing auto chess. That lasted a hot minute. And I remember you sat down and you were like, why? You said out loud, wow, auto chess looks great. Like, what are your settings? And I was just like, that's just 4K. It's not even max settings. That's just 4K. And you basically were like, well, fuck. And you upgraded to 4K not too long after that.
I don't know. I don't think it was around then. When did I buy these monitors?
Yep, because I could check when I bought mine.
Actually, yeah.
Meanwhile, now our house, we have 3 of the same Dell 4K monitor between me and
I
Emily.
actually have 2 different monitors. I got a Dell one, right? That's only 60 hertz. Right, but has really good color replication, right? And then I have a LG one that the color is meh. It's a little bit off. It's not bad, but it's not great. But it goes to 144 hertz. The thing is, my GPU doesn't support 144 hertz. It only supports like 92.
I mean, I lock all my monitors at 60 because my 1080 is that 60 is what you're getting.
Right, but if I... that is one reason to get a new video card, is to get more hertz. But actually, what do I do that needs more hertz?
Yep. Are you playing competitive FPSs for real and seriously?
Right. It's like, do I actually need those extra hertz, the extra refresh rate? It's like, I will eventually.
Yep. But meanwhile, look at me. I'm playing competitive FPSs seriously with intent to be good at them. And I'm still sticking around at 60.
Yeah. I mean, it's fine.
Because I'm still upper silver logo. Like, I am not better than my refresh rate at Overwatch.
So the TLDR of upgrading is, don't be wasteful right, with your money or with the environment or with things that still work and are perfectly serviceable, right? Don't upgrade fruitlessly if there's no reason for it, if it's not actually going to result in an improvement of something meaningful, right?
I think
life.
Most importantly, lead your life in terms of the acquisition of things from the perspective of, or at least useful things, from the perspective of, is there a problem, a difficulty, a hole in my life that this will fill in some material way?
I'm trying to achieve, and the tools are the reason that I am not achieving the goal, is that tools are inadequate, or is it, right, or not?
Because never forget when I bought my skis, when I was first learning how to ski again, and I was like, why are those, what's better about those skis? And the guy was like, they're several $100s more, and they're blue, and you clearly don't know the difference between them, so you should buy these skis. And he kept pointing at the cheapest skis they sold. It was
Why is a person whose job it is to sell skis telling you to buy the cheaper one? So that you know that that's the store that you should come back to when you...
Guess where I went back to buy expensive skis like 8 years later when I knew what the fuck I was doing. And I went in and I was like, I know exactly why those skis are better in detail. And the same guy was there.
Yep.
It was the ski house upstate by Fishkill.
Oh, that one.
Okay. Yeah, that one.